Welcome to Good Grief, the podcast where resilience meets reality. I'm your host, Dr. Christine Malone. In this podcast, we delve deep into the stories of individuals who've triumphed over tragedy, adversity, and trauma. In every episode, we bring you raw and honest narratives from guests who faced life's most challenging moments head on. Through candid conversations, they share their journeys of resilience, shedding light on the strategies, mindset shifts, and support systems that empowered them to rise above their darkest hours. Join us as we explore the profound depths of human resilience and discover how, even in the face of life's toughest trials, there can be light, growth, and yes, good grief. Okay, listeners, thank you so much for joining me today. My guest is Jenny Leavitt, and she is a grief recovery coach, author, and speaker dedicated to helping Christians navigate loss while holding on to their faith. So, Jenny, if you would like to tell us a bit about yourself and kind of how you got into doing the grief recovery coach role.
I certainly will. Thank you. So my name is Jenny, and I'm sure we'll talk about this more in just a little bit, but I have experienced some significant loss in my life. About 10 years ago, we lost our 17-year-old son to a drunk driver.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
And I've had some other losses since then. My mom, my sister, who was only 51 when she passed. So, that's been a lot. It's been a lot to try to work through and overcome. And one of the things that has really helped me work through a lot of those things is being able to help someone else. I know that was one of the best things that happened in our recovery was people that just came alongside us and they were just real with us
Yeah,
and just met us right where we were and helped us.
yeah.
And that's really my heart to help other people is I remember what that pain is like, and just if I can help even just one person know that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, there you can get through this, you can come out a better person, with growth,
Yes.
then it's all worth it to me.
You bring up a really excellent point there that I wanted to expand on before we go further, and that is how we help people that are in such extreme grief. I know when my son passed away, a couple of really close friends that were very, they just again just come and walk with you as you mentioned, but a lot of people don't have any idea what to do or to say, and unfortunately, a lot of them will stay away because of that, or they just they're just I'm so uncomfortable, I just don't know what to do, so I'll send you some flowers or maybe some food or something. So I think it's kind of an important point to say, if you know someone who's going through something so incredibly horrible that you can actually there are things you can do, and much of that just be there, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've had over the years, because in that same accident that we lost our son Jacob in, our oldest son, our 20-year-old son at the time, Caleb, was driving the vehicle and he almost didn't survive. So it was a lot. And we've had people since then that when they find out our story, they're like, "Hey, so my friend just lost so and so. How can I help them? What can I do?" And one of the things that it's common for me to say is sometimes you don't have to do anything, you just have to be there.
Be there.
You don't have to say anything. If you're familiar with the book of Job in the Bible, this is my joke. Job's 3 friends did great for that first week that they were there because they didn't say anything. They just shut up and sat with him. That's it. But then as soon as they opened their mouths, it went downhill from there. I mean, so sometimes all you have to do is just sit with them, and just say, "Hey, I'm here." You know, and sometimes even just being honest and saying, "I really don't know what to say,
Yeah.
but I'm here for you. I'm a friend."
Yep. Yep.
Sometimes that's all it takes. You don't have to have the right words or
Yeah, because you can't. There
Mm-mm.
are no right words. There's nothing you can say. I mean, I always recommend people, try to do like practical things, come over and clean and bring food and pick up the
Yeah.
other from school or whatever you can do that takes those practical chores off of the shoulder.
Mhm.
But for the most part, yeah. And I think, at least in my case, I had people that would say things they thought were helpful that really were not helpful. I mean, really not. At my son's funeral, he was the middle of my children. I had 4 others, or I'm sorry, 3 others by then. Somebody actually said to me, "It's a good thing you have other children," as
Yeah.
if,
I've heard that so many times it makes me cringe.
and I think, why would
Mm.
anybody think that's like he was a
Yeah.
parachute? a pair of shoes that just got misplaced, and I understand people want to say something, they mean well, they do, they just don't realize that did not help them. That was
Yeah.
not helpful at all. So,
My husband says, only halfway joking, that he's learned what not to say after somebody
yeah,
experiences a loss, because we've had people say stuff too that we're like, "Oh, I just have to remind myself their heart was probably in the right place," you know?
yeah, yeah,
But, yeah, and on a practical side, if there's, anybody that's watching or listening, one of the things, because I am a grief coach, one of the things that, and it's a practical tip that I share with people who are actually the grieving one,
mhm,
is I know when I was, especially in the thick of it, when you're still, like, in a brain fog and you're overwhelmed, there's so much change in your life, and people will mean well, and they'll ask you, "Hey, what can I do to help?" And
mhm,
when people first ask you that, it can be like, I don't know, nothing." And so what I encourage people who are grieving is to get a piece of paper and maybe stick it to the side of your fridge, and when you're going throughout your day, like, let's say that you realize, "Oh, you know what? I need such and such from the store." Write that down
mhm,
and just keep your little list going, so if a friend calls and says, "Hey, I wanna help, but I don't know how," you can go look on the side of your fridge and be like, "Oh, you know what? Can you get see if somebody would mind mowing my backyard?" Or whatever that practical need is, that when you're grieving, it's overwhelming.
yes,
Make yourself a little note, and that's just a practical way that you can help the people that want to help you.
yes. I
And
love
those people really do wanna help you,
yeah.
they just don't know how. So if you can give them some practical ways, it's gonna be a win-win because you get the help you need, and they feel like they're actually doing something.
Yes. I think a lot of people think they need to do something, I don't I wanna use the word substantial, or I'm not sure
Yeah.
what it is, but mowing my lawn is still gonna grow and someone needs to mow
Yep.
it, or can you take the garbage out, or can you pick
Mhm.
this up from school? I know, my younger sister took my 2 older kids when my middle son passed away. She took my 2 older kids to the, like, county fair or something so that they
Mhm.
could have a fun day, right?
Mhm.
Whereas my husband and I were in the midst of a bunch of other
Yeah.
things. So it's like, different things like that are very, very helpful that
Mhm.
whether you think so or not, but I love your idea of the note. I've not heard that one yet. I love that
Yeah.
one. Great one. So I'm guessing that these losses are kind of why you got into doing the
Oh,
grief recovery coach.
yes.
Okay.
Yes, exactly. Mhm.
And what does that entail? What do you do as a grief recovery coach?
Try to come alongside them. There is a big difference between a coach and an actual certified therapist, or even a certified counselor. A counselor, and I will be the first to tell people if they wanna work with me, but what I'm sensing from them is they really have some untangling of past issues that they need to work through. That's more of a counselor who's licensed to untangle those things. A coach is more of, I recognize where you're at, and I know where you want to go. You want to get to a place of healing moving forward. So, what can we do? What steps can we make? What kind of path can we start to chart out for you to help you get where you want to go in the future? So, that's kind of the analogy that I give, and that I know from what I had to do working forward, especially 10 years ago. And I know it's different for everybody. Everybody's grief journey is different. I get that. But there are some common things. You and I were talking before we started recording about the forgiveness aspect. Everybody has to work through that differently too. My husband, and our son who survived, all of us had to work through forgiveness. And all three of us had a different journey through forgiveness.
Yeah.
So there are things that are similar for people that have to work, but the path may be different.
Yeah. No, I think that's important. And I also would add to that, having been through numerous grief episodes myself, that the path isn't always the same each time either. So it's kind of
That is true. It really depends on the type of loss even. I mean, personalities are different, but even the type of loss, I was sharing with you, and that I lost my son, um, my mom 4 4 years ago, 5 years ago, my sister 2 years ago, and I mean, that's just family members. I've lost friends and, people from my church and stuff like that too, and each one of those relationships is different, so each loss is different,
yes, yes,
you know?
true.
So
kinda use the roadmap and go, "Okay, I know I didn't like this when I did it when this before I didn't like that I did that," or, "It
Yeah.
was very helpful for me to do this," or to reach out, but but not to expect yourself to have the same time frame,
Mhm.
whatever that may be, and again, I think when there is a sense of, the word forgiveness, there's a sense where someone, or not a sense, there's the fact that someone was responsible for the end of them,
Mhm.
whether it's an accident or, God help us, intentional, whatever it might be, is there can be, even more so of a problem, so I
Yeah. Yeah, and with us, another thing that really pops in my mind is really related to the forgiveness is probably why it comes to mind, is the anger part of it. That's very common when people are working through grief too, and all 3 of us had to deal with the anger in a different way. And our son who survived, Caleb, the 20-year-old, um, part of his story that is still simply astounds me is he got so angry after the accident. He got angry at God, he got angry at the other driver, he was angry at himself, even though it wasn't his fault, but he was the older brother, he was driving, he felt responsible, survivor's guilt.
Yep,
Um, and it just there were times it was really hard to be around him because he was so angry. And part of his story that's amazing is one time he just um, got to the point where he was by himself and he says that he just like started screaming at God and saying, "Oh, basically just letting it all out."
yeah,
And instead of feeling judgment or shame or anything, he said it was almost like that quiet voice on the inside that said, "Are you done now? Because now we can move forward."
yeah, yeah,
And it was such a breaking point in him that instantly, when he started being back around people, people were like, "What's different about you?" Like, his whole countenance was different.
yeah, yeah,
Um, but like my husband and I, our battle with anger and working through the anger, that it wasn't that significant. So, like, everybody's is different how we're gonna process these things that can be so heavy.
right, right, and I think it's important to also know, I mean, if everybody who's familiar with the stages of grief, anger is one of them, and
Mhm.
is natural, and it's okay to
Yeah.
be I know it, but, hanging on to anger for lengths of time is very unhealthy, so I know
Mhm.
it took me, many, many years to forgive the people that caused my son's, injuries that ended his life. Took me a long time, and I didn't think I'd ever get there. But when
Yeah.
I did, what a weight that was off of my shoulders, and,
Mhm.
those people don't cross my mind, unless I'm
Yeah.
actually thinking of them, because it's just they don't hold a place in my brain anymore,
Mhm.
which is for me, not for them, but for me, so
Yeah.
that's important. Now I know you wrote a book about your family, so tell us a bit
Mhm.
about
So, my husband and I have been married 31 years. So we've been married about 20 years when the accident happened, and we have been in some form of ministry leadership like that whole time. And we were in ministry leadership then, but after the accident, everything, and I've talked to other people too that especially really traumatic things like that, it it will cause you to question everything that you thought you believed, that you had your faith based in. And I mean, the same was true for me. And so one of the sermons that my husband had preached, this was probably 25 years ago, it was a long time ago. He talked about like recognizing the footprints of Satan, of our enemy, like around your life. And I like to flip that on its head and look for those moments when only God could have intervened and done something for us. And so that's where the name of the book comes from. It's called God Prints: Finding Evidence of God in the Shattered Pieces of Life, because I really made a conscious effort to start looking for the good.
yeah,
And that's one of the strategies that I try to encourage people. And it's related to that whole gratitude piece, which I'm sure people have heard about, that if you want to change your day and how your day is going, just stop and try to think of even just one thing that you can be grateful for. I don't care if it's going outside and I'm grateful that the sun is shining. Like there's got to be something. I'm grateful I have a roof over my head and it's not raining on me right now. And so it started out like that way, and then just trying to find those places where I could see that he'd intervened. and that he had helped us. And so anyway, it wound up being, our story. And it's just, I've received so much good feedback from that because I tried to write it in a way that other people, as they're reading it, hopefully it helps them shift their mindset some too, and look for those good places in life.
Yeah, yeah. I think yeah, I like that, the whole focusing on something good. Because otherwise I think when we get mired down in the sadness and the grief and or even the
Yep.
anger, it
Yep.
weighs you down and you're down there and then your body doesn't feel good and
Yep.
all that is even scientifically proven as far as illness
Mhm.
so on. It's not a healthy place to be. So, then you started doing, your courses. So tell us
Mhm.
about your courses that you offer and what those entail and what people do in them.
Yeah, so the courses, actually all of this is a little bit outside of my comfort zone. But it's one of those things that when, like I said at the beginning, when people have helped you, I want to turn around and I want to be able to help others. And one of the things that we discovered anyway was it was overwhelming how many people started reaching out to us afterwards and saying, "Hey, we know somebody that they just lost somebody. Can we give them your information? Can you help them?" And, early on, we were like, "Yeah, sure," well, and but then it got to be like, this is happening quite a bit, and there's only 2 of us. We can only do so much. So, I created the courses. They actually just launched this year, and I designed them to be smaller, like bite-sized chunks and that people can do at home in the privacy of their home. And my goal is even if we can't actually sit down with somebody, that they could work through this on their own. And I tried to record the videos just like you and I are talking now, just like if I was sitting down with somebody and I was talking to them, what I wish somebody had told me 10 years ago about some of these topics. Um, Probably the most, when I surveyed the people that are in my community that I work with about this stuff, hands down, the number one issue that they faced was feeling alone, like nobody really understands. And really, a lot of the things that you and I have already talked about, the anger, the forgiveness, people can feel like, I know I felt like this before, like there must be something wrong with me. I'm like, I I feel like I'm the only one that is still in this place or dealing with this level of anger or whatever the issue is. And that was what I just kept hearing from the community that I work with was, I just feel so alone, and I feel like our friends or coworkers or whatever have moved on, and they think that, like, they don't even realize that I'm still hurting. And like what we were talking about way earlier is that sometimes people are even afraid to bring up the name of the loved one. Our son's name was Jacob. Sometimes they're afraid to even bring that up. So the grieving person feels like, well, they've just forgotten and they've moved on. But the friend is like, I I haven't forgotten. I'm scared to bring their name up. Like I'm scared to bring that up. And the only way to overcome those things is to just have open conversations about it. I've done this with a few of my really good friends, and that's how I know that's what they were thinking. And I've had to tell them, "No, no, no, it actually feels really good to me that you remember him and that you love him." And they'll be like, "Oh, of course I do. Of course I remember." But it's being able to have that communication and being able to be like, "Okay, no, I'm not alone in this. We're just 2 human beings that are unsure about until you have that communication and you just open the door, especially with somebody that you can trust your feelings with."
Yeah. So true. I know for me, I've actually had people say to me, "Well, I don't wanna bring him up. My son don't wanna bring him up because I don't wanna remind you," and, they're reminded me he lives with me. I mean, you don't need to
Yeah,
remind and if I share memories, of my son, and one of my favorite terms is you might see those memories come down my cheeks in tear form, but I am thrilled to talk about my
yeah,
son. Thrilled to tell you about him. I'm thrilled to tell you what my life was like with him, so on. And I think a lot of people struggle with that, I just will just not talk about it, and
mhm,
you know what? That's actually worse than if you did talk about him. So,
yeah,
think I talk too much and that people would get tired of listening to me talk about my son or whatever, until, and unfortunately we all do it, you're gonna lose someone yourself and you realize that, yeah,
Mhm.
no, actually it is very helpful to talk about dad or mom or whomever it is
Yeah.
and the memories and whatever it is, there's gonna be good there and to focus on that good rather than whatever way they passed or however old,
Mhm.
so on and so forth. So how, your tell us what the names of your courses are. If it I know one of 'em's called How to Overcome Loneliness and Grief.
Mhm. Yep, and then the other one is the flagship course, which is Resilient, and it's trying to help people, and this all of them really, I'm gonna be adding to them, but the large one, Resilient, is broken into bite-sized pieces on the topics that I find, um, I wind up addressing frequently, while I'm working with grief clients, um, and so they are designed that it doesn't matter what kind of loss it's from. It can be losing a parent, losing a spouse, losing a child, but really, we were talking before. Well, I'll give you this example. After we had our loss, it was probably maybe 3 years after that or so. A friend of mine, we were out and about, and I knew what had just happened in her family, but we hadn't, it was one of those we hadn't really talked about it, and then we wound up being, how we women are, we were in the bathroom at the same time, and, so we got to talking a little bit, and she was crying, and so I was trying to figure out how to broach this subject because what had happened is her daughter, had decided to not only basically break away from their family, for a boy, um, but, like, basically disown them and, wouldn't have anything to do with them anymore, and it was really, really hard, obviously, just making some really bad decisions, and so my friend, when she was crying, she was like, "I didn't know how to talk to you about it, Jenny, because you've lost a son, like, your son actually died. Who am I? My daughter's alive." And I said, "Oh, no, no, no. You're still grieving. You're just grieving what your hopes and dreams for her were, and the plans that you thought you had for her, and the potential that that she has that right now she's throwing away."
Yeah,
And that just made her cry even more because she was like, "Yes, I hadn't realized but you're putting words to what I was feeling. I just didn't know." And I said, "I know, because grief comes in a lot of different forms. Grieving the loss of a marriage, um, you know, to divorce, grieving, my mom, oh my goodness, before she passed, she grieved her pet, her dog that had been with her for I and it wasn't just with her, that dog was with her, everywhere. She grieved that loss almost like it was an actual family member, So, I mean, that everybody's different. There are things that hit us hard that others maybe not understand why it hits us so hard, but it does.
yeah,
Um, so anyway, the courses I tried to design them so that I don't wanna say generic enough, but that they're broad enough that they can help people regardless of what form of grief that is. So that they can hopefully get the help that they need and move forward. Life will never be the same. You're gonna have to find that I hate to use the term because I don't really like it, but that new normal, because you can't go back to what you thought was normal before is gone. And my husband's phrase that I always borrow from him because I love it is that when we go through those times in life, we can either let them make us bitter or better.
yep,
So the choice is ours. We can stay in that place where we're just not healed, or we can try to seek out the healing. Because it's there. It's going to be work. It's going to be hard, but it's there.
yeah.
So,
And you, become a better person once you get
mhm. Yeah.
hard for people sometimes too, to almost I've had people say to me, "Well, it feels like I have to let go of, my loved one and my feelings for my loved one,"
Mm,
because that's what grief to them is,
yeah.
and, well, that's what you need to wrap your head around and really get work through, so it's not,
Yeah.
go of anything. You're gonna hang on to all those memories, unfortunately, the bad ones too, but you will they'll all still be there. You're not giving up
Mhm.
of that person. It's just I like to think, and I'm pretty sure I'm onto something, that the person who's gone doesn't want us to wallow in, you
Yeah.
know, place of pain and misery, as we keep going on. So we will definitely be. I know I haven't mentioned this yet, but I want to mention we're going to put links to your website so people can find you in our podcast notes, so that um, you are easily found in your courses and so on. But one thing I wanted to hit on, I know, that I had listed on my paper here, is myth busting grief recovery. So,
Mhm.
talk a little bit about some of the misconceptions of grief and what those myths, that's kind of hard with my myths are.
Yeah. One of the ones that it it irks me is that, and you kinda hit on it a little bit, is that people can get this idea that grief is just gonna be this little linear checklist type thing, and that, there's stages of grief. So, as long as they can say, "Well, I've dealt with the anger part. Check. Now I'm ready to move on to the next stage." And I'm a list person. So if that was the case, I'd be like all for it, but that's not the case at all. That is probably the biggest myth that I like to bust out there, because people just think that, like, "Oh, well, it's been 2 years. I mean, according to everything that I've read, after this amount of time, I should be over it." And it's like, not necessarily. I have met people, God love them, but I've met people that 20 years later, they are still battling with anger or unforgiveness, or, like, because they never dealt with it. So it's not like this checklist that you can just go down. Um, and what can happen with that is people can think there's something wrong with them. And so sometimes the only way to describe it, and I'm glad that we have the visual right now, is because I'm a hand person, if you hadn't noticed, but instead of it being a checklist, it sometimes can be like a ping pong, where you think I've dealt with anger, so I can go down this checklist, and maybe you have. Maybe you've merely made great strides in anger. But then 6 months later, something happens and bong, you're like, "Ooh, I thought I had dealt with that."
Yep.
And maybe it's like, you have, and you've done a good job, but you may still have to bounce back to that every once in a while, and that's okay. It's normal. It's
Okay.
fine.
Yep.
And when after we had our loss, I actually, went to a grief therapist counselor for quite some time, and I remember, oh my gosh, she used the illustration of, if you have 2 mountains and then there's a valley in between, and she said, the accident happened and you were up here, and then the accident happened and boom, you went to the lowest bottom, and now you're trying to come up the other side, but it can feel like 2 steps forward, 5 steps back, and you're back in the valley, forward, back, forward, back. And one of the things that she said to me that, it was such an encouragement to me, was she said, "Jenny, what I want you to do is I want you to look back, and whenever you start feeling like, oh, I'm just not, something's wrong with me, I'm not progressing the way I could, look back and say, 6 months or a year ago, was I better or worse?"
Yeah.
And if you can honestly look and say, "I'm better, I'm not where I want to be, but I am better," then that means you're coming up. You may have taken 10 steps up and 20 steps back, t in that 6 months, but if you can look back and say, I am better,"
Mhm.
then you're making progress. Don't compare yourself. That's another myth, is that whole comparing ourselves to somebody else, and your journey with grief is unique, just like they're unique. Just because they have dealt with the forgiveness in their life and you're still working on it, don't get into that comparison trap. And it can be really easy to fall into that with our family members. Maybe maybe they're already, like, let's say, back to work, and you're not there yet. It can be really easy to fall into that comparison trap. Don't go there.
Yeah, I'll even throw the word judgment in there too. I know some like I went back to work fairly quickly after my son passed. He was very, very ill, so we knew it was coming. Because for me, work is the place where I'm in control, where I'm in everything. I know what I'm doing. I'm in charge. I don't have to deal with what's going on in my head and so on. And other people would be like, I can't believe she went back to work that early. It's like, don't be
Mhm.
no, you don't know what works for one person and what's working for another. So don't, or to say, I can't believe she's not back to work yet, or whatever
Yep.
that statement.
Mhm.
Don't do that. Don't do that.
It's so true. Right after the accident, we probably had, I don't know, 20 people offer to cut our grass. And we lived out in the country. We had an acre of land. So I mean it was pretty good, decent amount of grass. And I don't know, 2 or 3 days after the accident, my husband's out on the riding lawnmower cutting the grass. And I was like, "What are you doing? We have all these people that are offering to cut the grass." And he said for something very similar to what you said. He said, "When I'm out there, I can tune everything out, I can turn my cell phone off, and I can just mow the grass. That's it."
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love that. That's yeah, I know exactly how it feels. It's that
Yep.
concept of again, yeah, turning the brain off and just focusing on the thing and actually control and have focus.
Mhm.
And yes, and even if it's something as mundane as mowing the grass, I mean, it just to me that makes perfect sense. So,
Yep.
you have, like I know you've given us plenty of things, but, any advice or thoughts for someone who's new to the grieving process or has someone they know or they work with that's fairly new to the grieving process that you would recommend?
Well, I would just like to say that in our Western culture, especially, and I love America, don't get me wrong, but our independent mindset sometimes is a real hindrance, and grief is one of those areas because we too tend to, in the Western culture, we tend to just be like, okay, I mean, and it shows in what we allot for people for bereavement days from work. You know, we lost one son and almost lost our other son, and I got 1 day of bereavement and my husband got 3. That's just that is a classic example of our Western culture that we're just like, "Yeah, that was hard. Okay, let's get back to work." And you're like, "What?" Whereas other cultures around the world, like, when you experience a loss, you take the time, and it's actually in the culture that it's recognized that this is significant. This is going to impact you. And so I think that's lost in our American society a lot, unfortunately, until you actually experience it yourself. And so I want to encourage people that if you are going through a recent loss or you're trying to help somebody that's going through a recent loss, it's okay that it hurts. It's okay that you're not ready to move on, you know? And it's also okay to reach out for help. I always encourage people to try to if you're part of a faith-based group of some kind, a church or something, start there because usually the leaders there can point you in the right direction at the very least. There are grief support groups out there for all kinds of losses and for people that are trying to help people through losses. So there is help out there, and just don't be afraid to reach out and to try to get help, even if all you do is go sit and listen in the beginning. I know the first probably 2 times that I went to a grief support group, I didn't say a word. And now my husband and I have led them, and there are people that they'll come, we do them in 13-week intervals, and we have people that come that they won't speak until, like, the 10th or 11th week. That's fine. And then we have people that have actually cycled through several times with us, you know? So whatever, just know that there is help that's out there. You don't have to walk this road alone, and that whatever you're comfortable doing is okay too.
Right, right, exactly. Well, Jenny, thank you so much for your time today. I really enjoyed our conversation. As I mentioned, we'll put your links in our podcast notes so people can find you and your courses and your book and so on. But
Yep.
you've absolute pleasure to meet.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed it too.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Good Grief. We hope that stories shared today have inspired and empowered you on your own journey of resilience. If you want to dive deeper into the themes of trauma, tragedy, and survival, be sure to check out my memoir, The Day I Became the Spider Killer, a memoir of trauma, tragedy, and survival. In this book, I shared my own raw and honest experiences, offering insights and strategies for overcoming life's toughest challenges. You can purchase the book on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or listen to it on Audible. Your support helps us continue to bring these powerful stories to light and spread a message of hope and resilience. Stay tuned for more incredible stories on our next episode. Until then, remember, even in the face of life's toughest trials, there can be light, growth, and good grief.